When you work as a music therapist, one of the areas of music making you most rely upon is improvisation, because in a sense you're working with a continuous language of sound and music in your sessions. As a writer and composer, what that means for me is that actually I'm writing all day long every day. And sometimes material evolves from those sessions that becomes quite structured and can lead to a song or an established piece of music. What's happened for me over the years is that I think my songwriting and composition has been profoundly enriched by allowing music to form, to develop in those kind of contexts, and then lead to songs that obviously relate in part to the work that I do. So Fierce Love is a collection of pieces and songs that have been inspired in part by my work as a music therapist, but also just by my view of the world. And what makes it quite different is that I think the influences are sonically also from my music therapy work. A lot of the instruments that I will work with on a day-to-day basis are incorporated in Fierce Love. My daughter is a very major part of the album. That's very special to me, of course. She's a wonderful singer, and she is the second vocalist, if I can put it that way, on the album. So some of the songs are directly stories that relate to my work, and some of the pieces are simply pieces that have grown out of my musical journey of the last 5-6 years. Many, many years ago, when I was a 15-year-old, I wrote a song called Gethsemane, and this was in response to a 15-year-old reading the story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane from one of the Gospels, and being truly challenged and very moved by the way Jesus' battle in prayer was expressed there. And of course, at the age of 15, I had no idea whatsoever that this would eventually evolve into what is now called the Passion. But it started as a very personal look at expression of my journey of faith into the person of Jesus. In those first years, it grew into a kind of a 25-minute sequence of songs that I actually recorded on my first ever album, which is called Fireflake, and was released in 1974. 6 years later, it was expanded and became The Passion. In April, what I want to do is to bring people back to the heart of how it began. So I want people to come back to the music fresh, and we've put together a wonderful band of musicians who will be working from those original recorded parts, and we're going to bring a version of The Passion that I hope puts me back in touch with how it all began, and I will try to link some of the pieces in The Passion with the stories behind them. So yes, I hope a very personal but also very beautiful production of this work that has been part of my life from the age of 15 to where I am now. I'm not telling you how old I am now. As a 15, 16-year-old, brought up in a Christian home, so I had plenty of knowledge about the Christian faith. I think for many people, the struggle is to embrace the full humanity of Jesus, is to grasp hold of the fact that Jesus was completely human as well as the Son of God. And by being totally immersed in humanity, he experienced everything that you and I experienced. And when it came to that stage of his life and his mission, his suffering was complete as a human being. All the pain, all the anguish, the anxiety, Jesus experienced just as you or I would, but with the huge, inexpressible, added burden of knowing as the Son of God what the purpose of all this was. I think in those years as a teenager, this is what I was trying to grasp. And when I look back at my lyrics, songs like Gethsemane and Simon Carry My Cross, for sure they are the lyrics of a young teenager. I'd probably write those songs very differently now. But I see Adrian, the 15, 16-year-old, struggling with these concepts, and then also extending that to the other people involved in these events. Peter, Mary, Mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Judas, Pilate, how they all dealt with this utterly historical moment in the history of our world. And I wanted to put that into song and into pieces of music, and each one of them has its own very personal story. So yeah, I think that this is how I look back on the sort of the heart behind the Passion. There are kind of very special stories around most of the pieces in the Passion, how they came to be. Golgotha has a very visual story behind it, because I was at an event somewhere in the south of England, and I had some time to myself, and where I was staying there was a tiny little chapel in the grounds of this building, and at the front of the chapel there was a harmonium, one of these organs you play like this. So that was all there was, but I wanted to play some music, so I shut the door and I went up to the harmonium and I just started to improvise, and I found a sequence of notes and chords that I really liked and worked well on that instrument. And then it began to grow somehow. There was, as sometimes happens when you're a composer, something settles and then it takes you on its own journey. You know where you're going with this piece. It's almost writing itself. At this moment, I turned, and at the back of the church there was a font, a baptismal font with a golden cross on top of it, and the sun was shining through a stained glass window. And the way the light fell on the cross, for a moment, the cross became, without any shadow of a doubt, a skull. It was the outline of a skull. The beams of light, the way that they were formed on the cross, formed the picture of a skull. And I was playing at the same time, and suddenly I'm thinking, skull, cross, I think this is Golgotha. And I carried on playing, and the sun, of course, moved. And within 1 minute or so, it was a blazing cross. The whole cross just lit up and shone, as if to say, yeah, crucifixion and resurrection. And all of this was happening as I was playing. And, you know, I came to the end of this, whatever it was, 15, 20 minutes, and I knew what I'd written. It was Golgotha. And that has stayed that way ever since. I think it's very hard for a composer to evaluate his or her own work. So all I can do is bring to this question my own memories and my own sort of perception of this work and my life. Firstly, without question, it represents a longer period of time than anything else I've ever written, because the first song, Gethsemane, was written when I was 15, and I'm coming in April to perform it again, however, 40 years later. But I think there is something else about it, and when I look back at the piano part, because that's how it started as just piano and voice, I see there, I hear there, a composer discovering his language, his approach to the piano, his growing realization of how he, with his technique and his musical background, could use the notes of the piano, how I could, in a way, develop my own original style. That was very important to me. I remember that, even in those years. I wanted to be sure that what I was writing was from me. I wasn't copying, it wasn't plagiarism, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to sound like him or her. I wanted my own style. And I think The Passion represents the real beginnings of Adrian discovering his own style of music. That combination of classical, elements of jazz, progressive rock, the rhythms of rock that was so incredibly powerfully interpreted by drummers like Simon Phillips when it came to the album. So I think there's a kind of purity. It's almost like you're listening to a young composer at some of the most important stages of his own discovery of what excited him about music making and music writing.